Professor Anuradha Jain, Professor of Economics at Vivekananda Institute of Professional Studies. Today in this series, we are going to discuss about classical theory of income and employment. The study of classical theory of income and employment is essential because some of the aspects of classical theory are more relevant to the conditions prevailing in the developing countries. And this theory highlights those factors which govern income and employment in these countries. While Keynesian theory emphasizes the role of effective demand in the determination of income and employment, classical economists believe that in a free market economy, there was always a tendency towards the establishment of full employment of labor and there was sufficient demand for the output produced. Classical theory of income and employment, which is an introductory analysis of this lecture series today, we studies the two basic notions, that is Say's law of market and wage price flexibility. Say's law of market says that, like according to classical theory propounded by Ricardo and Adam Smith, levels of income and employment are governed by fixed capital stock on the one hand and wage goods on the other. It may be noted in the beginning that the classical theory believes in full employment or near full employment prevailing in the economy. Say's law says that there is always that supply creates its own demand, and whenever we produced any commodity, then there is no problem of creating demand in the economy for those goods. This implies that every increase in production made possible by the increase in the productive capacity of the stock of fixed capital will be sold in the market, and there will be no problem of lack of demand, because demand will be automatically created when the supply takes place. And the basis of this classical theory is the Say's law of market, which was carried forward by classical economists like Marshall and Pigou. They explained the determination of output and employment divided into individual markets for labor, goods and money market. And each market involves a built-in equilibrium mechanism to ensure full employment in the economy. And if there is general overproduction in the economy, then some laborers may be asked to leave their job, because overproduction means there is more supply in the market and the production will go down, and therefore the demand for labor also goes down. The problem of unemployment arises in the economy in the short run, and in the long run the economy will automatically tend towards full employment when the demand and supply of goods becomes equal. So when a producer produces goods and pays wages to workers, the workers in return buy those goods in the market, and thus the very act of supplying goods implies a demand for them, and it is in this way that supply creates its own demand. Now, classical economics and classical theory of income and employment also talks about wage price flexibility. And classical economists believed that there was always full employment in the economy. In case of unemployment, a general cut in money wage would take the economy to the full employment level. And this argument is based on the assumption that there is direct and proportional relation between money, wages and the real wages. When money wages are reduced, they lead to reduction in the cost of the production and consequently to the lower prices of the products, because the labor cost normally consists of the 60% of the cost of the production. And when price falls, demand for products will increase and sales will be pushed up, and increased sales will necessitate the employment of more labor, and ultimately full employment will be attained in the economy. Classical theory is based on some assumptions, and the assumptions are like there is the existence of full employment in the economy. and they believe that there is laissez-faire capitalist economy without the government interference, and through the blades of the demand and supply, there is always an equilibrium, automatic equilibrium in the economy, and therefore there is no role of the government. They also believe that there is closed economy without any foreign trade, and every economy is self-sustained, and therefore no dependency on the other countries. There is perfect competition in the labor and product market, and all the labors they assume are the homogeneous, because this is the precondition for perfect competition in the market of labor market as well as the product market. Total output of the economy is divided between the consumption and investment expenditure. So you can say that Y is equal to C plus I. That means the total income or total output is equal to the C, that is consumption, or investment, that is I. The quantity of money is given, and money is only the medium of exchange, and there is no barter system in the economy. And wages and prices are perfectly flexible. That means that it adjusts to the changes in the economy, and there is automatic adjustment mechanism, because the economy that they assume is the laissez-faire economy. There is perfect information on the part of all the market participants. Then money wages and real wages are directly related and proportional. Capital stock and technical know-how are given, and everybody is aware about the technical change in the economy. The law of diminishing returns operates in the production, and classical economics assumes that there is long run in the economy, and they decide the equilibrium assuming the long run in the economy. Now, if we talk about the determination of output and employment, so in the classical theory, output and employment are determined by the production function and the demand for labor and the supply of labor in the economy. Now, given the capital stock, technical knowledge and other factors, a precise relation exists between total output and the amount of employment, that is the number of workers, those who are employed in the economy. Now, how we determine the output and employment in the classical economics? So, this is shown in the form of the production function, which can be defined as like Q is equal to function. Q means output here is the function of K, T and N. K stands for capital stock, T for technical knowledge and N for number of workers. So, given K and T, the production function becomes that Q is a function of only the N, that is the labor. Okay, so that means the number of workers employed in the economy. Now, output is an increasing function of the number of workers. That means as more the labor employed, more will be the production in the economy. But after a point when more workers are employed, diminishing marginal returns of the labor starts. So, you can see this in the diagram, that how we determine output and employment in the economy. So, in this figure we can say that this curve denotes the function of N, that means output is a function of labor employed. So, therefore, this is the equation that Q is a function of N, because we have assumed that technical and capital stocks are given. So, therefore, output depends only the level of employment. But that when more workers, that is NF, N2, because NF is the labor employment at the full employment level, okay, or at the equilibrium level. So, if more workers, that is NF, N2 are employed beyond the full employment level of output, that is OQ1, then there is increase in the output by Q1, Q2, and which is less than the increase in the employment N1 and 2, and that you can see, because after a point the diminishing returns starts, and this curve denotes the same over here. Now, in the labor market, the demand for labor and the supply of labor determines the level of output and employment. and classical economists regard the demand for labor as the function of the real wage rate. That means demand for labor, that is DN, is a function of W upon P. W here is the nominal wage rate and price P is the price level, and that you can see in the graph. And to explain more about the graph, we can say that like dividing wage rate by the price level, that means W upon P, we get the real wage rate W upon P, and the demand for labor is a decreasing function of the real wage rate as shown by the downward sloping demand curve. So DF, you can see this is a demand curve which is a downward sloping demand curve, and it is by reducing the real wage rate that more workers can be employed. So that means if real wage rate goes down, then the demand for labor also increases. So that denotes the downward sloping shape of the demand for labor. And if we talk about the supply of labor, then you can say that the supply of labor also depends upon the real wage rate, that is SN denotes for the supply of labor, which is the function of W upon P. Again the same, W here is the nominal wage rate and price P is the price. So real W upon P is the real wage rate, and you can see that it is the increasing function. Okay, so therefore it is the graph supply of labor is the upward sloping graph, you can see in the diagram, and it is increasing the real wage rate that more workers can be employed. Now when demand for labor and supply of labor, that is SN, DN and SN curve intersects at the point E, you can see in the diagram, and the full employment level NF is determined at the equilibrium real wage rate, that is W upon P0, where there is intersection point at point E. You can see that equilibrium real wage rate is determined, and if the wage rate rises from WPO to WP1, the supply of labor will be more than the demand for labor. And therefore, if supply is more than the demand, you can say that there is unemployment in the economy. Okay, so now at WP1 wage rate, you can see this in the diagram, WP1 wage rate, there is a portion which is denoted by DS, and DS workers will be involuntary unemployed here because the demand for labor W upon P1D is less than their supply, that is W upon P1S, and with competition among the workers for work, they will be willing to accept a lower wage rate, because if there is unemployment in the economy, if people are not getting jobs, then obviously they will be willing to accept the job at a lower wage rate, and consequently the wage rate will start falling down and it will come to again the equilibrium level of W upon P0. Now if the supply of labor will fall and the demand for labor will rise, then again there will be equilibrium at point E, which will be restored again along with the full employment level, that is NR. So on the contrary, if the wage rate falls from W upon PO to W upon P2, the demand for labor will be more than its supply, and that you can see here that there will be excess demand of labor. And if there is excess demand of labor in the market, then obviously the wage rate will start increasing, okay, because demand is more than the supply, and therefore labor will demand more wage rate, and again finally that will reach to the equilibrium at P. So competition by employers for workers will raise the wage rate from W upon P2 to W upon P0, and the equilibrium point E will be restored along with the full employment level, that is NF. Okay, so this is the process of equilibrium in the labor market, like how the market will reach to the equilibrium automatically when there is excess of demand or excess of supply of labor in the market. Okay, so because there is they are assuming that this is a laissez-faire economy and no government intervention. So therefore, automatic adjustments takes place and the economy will reach back to the equilibrium. So the classical theory of employment was based on the assumption of full employment, where full employment was a normal situation and any deviation from this was regarded, as an abnormal situation. And this was based on the Say's law of market, as we have discussed. And according to this, like supply creates its own demand and the problem of overproduction and unemployment does not arise. And thus there is always full employment in the economy. Now, if there is overproduction and unemployment, the automatic forces of demand and supply in the market will bring back the full employment level in the economy. Now, in the classical theory, the determination of output and employment takes place in labor, goods and money market of the economy as shown in the diagram, and the forces of demand and supply in these markets will ultimately bring full employment in the economy. Now, you can see this diagram. This is divided into, 4 panels, panel A, B, C and D. Panel A talks about the, investment and saving, and where the intersection of these two decides the interest rate. And B is the production function that you can see that which shows the relationship between output and the labor market. Then panel C is the demand for labor and supply for labor that we just discussed. Panel D talked about, money market equilibrium, and then finally about the product market equilibrium. And to explain this, like in the classical analysis, output and employment in the economy are determined by aggregate production function, demand for labor and supply for labor. Now, given this stock capital, technical knowledge and other factors as we discussed already, there is a precise relation between total output and employment, and this is expressed as the Q as a function of K, T and N. Now, in other words, total output is a function of capital stock, technical knowledge, number of workers. Now, if K and T and total output is given the K and T, if it is already fixed, then total output is an increasing function of number of workers. Okay, that is Q is a function of N as shown in the panel B of the above diagram. And at point E, O and F workers produce OQ level of output. But beyond point E, as more workers are employed, diminishing marginal return starts. Now, in the labor market, the demand for and supply of labor determines, output and employment in the economy. That same we have discussed in the diagram also, where there is intersection of, demand for labor and supply for labor, and where they intersect each other, that is the point of equilibrium, and that decides, how many laborers are employed. So, the demand for labor depends on total output. As production increases, the demand for labor also increases. Demand for labor in turn depends upon the marginal productivity of labor, which declines as more workers are employed. Why? Because when you employ more, workers, more laborers, then even the less efficient worker will also get the job, and therefore, it shows the marginal productivity, diminishing marginal productivity of the labor. So, a supply for labor depends upon the wage rate, okay, because supply for labor is the function of W upon P and is an increasing function of the wage rate. Why increasing function? Because there is direct relationship between the wage rate and the supply for labor, because as wage rate increases, the supply for labor also increases, because people would prefer to work more if they are getting more wages. So, the demand for labor also depends upon the wage rate, okay, and is a decreasing function of the wage rate. Now, therefore, both demand for and supply for labor are the functions of the real wage rate, and the intersection point E decides about the equilibrium wage rate. Now, if we talk about the goods market. So in classical analysis, the goods market is in equilibrium when savings and investment are in equilibrium. That we saw in the panel A of the diagram, where savings and investments are equal, where then the goods market is in equilibrium. And this equality is brought about by the mechanism of interest rate at the full employment level of output, so that the quantity of goods demanded is equal to the quantity of goods supplied. And this is shown in panel A of the figure, where S is equal to I at point E, okay, when the interest rate is OR. Now, if we talk about money market, then money market is in equilibrium when the demand for money equals the supply for money. And this is explained by the quantity theory of money, which states that quantity of money is a function of price level. That means P is a function of MV. That is, changes in the general price level are proportional to quantity of money. Now, equilibrium in the money market is shown by the equation MV is equal to PT, where MV is the supply of money and PT is the demand for money. The equilibrium of the money market explains the price level corresponding to the full employment level of output, which relates, panel E, panel B with, MQ line that we have seen in the diagram. Now, the price level OP is determined by total output and the quantity of money, that is MV, and the real wage corresponding with the money wage is determined by W upon P curve, as shown in the panel D of the diagram. Now, when the money wages increases, the real wage also increases in the same proportion, and there is no effect on the level of output and employment. So, it follows that the money wage should be reduced in order to attain the full employment level in the economy. And thus, the classical economist favored a flexible price wage policy to maintain the full employment level in the economy. Now, this model of classical economist was criticized by Keynes, and the new theory was developed by Keynes, and the criticism we can discuss, to understand the Keynesian theory. And Keynes, vehemently criticized the classical theory of employment for its unrealistic assumption in his general theory. He attacks the classical theory on the following ground. First, like underemployment equilibrium. Now, Keynes rejected the fundamental classical assumption of full employment equilibrium in the economy. And Keynes says that equilibrium can be achieved even before the full employment level. So, it says that it is very much, unrealistic assumption of full employment. And we find that millions of workers, those who are prepared to work at the current wage rate, and even they are not ready, they are not, employed, they are not getting any jobs. So, there is always, some level of unemployment that exists in the economy. So, therefore, the existence of involuntary unemployment in capitalist economies, prove that underemployment equilibrium is a normal situation and full employment equilibrium is the abnormal and accidental. Now, reputation of Say's law, if we take or talk in terms of Keynes, then Keynes refuted Say's law of market that supply always create its own demand. He maintained that all income earned by the factor owners would not be spent in buying products that they help to produce. Then another criticism of Keynes talks about self-adjustment, and he says that self-adjustment always is not possible, because Keynes did not agree with the classical view that laissez-faire policy was essential for an automatic and self-adjusting process of full employment in the economy. Okay, so and another criticism that Keynes talk about is the rejection of quantity theory of money, because Keynes rejected the classical quantity theory of money, because theory of money on the ground that increase in money supply will not necessarily lead to rise in the prices in the economy. Okay, so in short, we can say that classical theory, even though it is very important to create the base, for the macroeconomics, but it was criticized by the new classical economist and Keynesian economist. So we will be developing more about the Keynesian theories in other lectures. So I am sure that you must have understood the classical theory of income and employment. Okay, so we end our lecture here, and we will be discussing more about Keynes in the other lecture series. Thank you so much. Thank you.